Hey everybody, it's Innovision! And the Legion Go 2's been out for just over a few months here in North America, and I finally had a chance to put it through its paces. As a result, I've had several folks in the community asking me for performance comparisons comparing Windows 11 versus SteamOS on this new hardware. This is going to be unlike anything else you've seen out there. In today's video, I will share real-world gaming performance across both of these operating systems across various TDP settings. More importantly, this isn't an in-game benchmark, this is real gameplay in a repeatable experiment. I'll share the lowdown on the test methodology and what truly makes it unique. I'll present a couple of meticulously chosen games with side-by-side gameplay comparisons. And I've put together a full analysis with charts and graphs so we can tease out any differences between the two operating systems. Stick around, cause you don't wanna miss any of it. The two games I've selected for today's study are Elden Ring and NBA 2K26. And while the games are quite different from one another, they're intentionally chosen to suss out any differences between the two operating systems. Elden Ring being a game with fast-paced combat and a multiplayer element to it, and NBA 2K26, a basketball simulation with a vast multiplayer element to it. This game has brought my high-end gaming PC to its knees in terms of frame drops and stutters, especially in congested multiplayer areas like the lobby. This is why these games are critical to my study. Note, neither one of these games has an in-game benchmark. So what we're seeing here is actual gameplay footage of me playing all these games under these various settings. And I've handpicked certain parts in the game to create a tight gameplay loop that's repeatable, especially for a study and experiment like this. I kid you not when I say I've been putting this study together for over a month. While I'm playing these games under Windows and SteamOS, we're going to take a look at 15, 20, and 25 watt TDP settings, and I've added a little bonus. We're going to take a look at the balanced TDP settings. So we're going to have 4 different TDP settings. For both games, I'm using the full resolution of the Legion Go 2 display, 1920 by 1200 with no resolution scaling and no frame gen. This is as close as we can get to an apples to apples comparison without having an in-game benchmark. You know, the thing about in-game benchmarks, they're highly deterministic. In the real world, data is messy. Gameplay is messy. Enemies, they might spawn in the same place, but how you interact with the enemies might be non-deterministic. This is the kind of thing that in-game benchmarks do not characterize. That's why we need more studies like this. All right, let's get started. First up, Elden Ring. What we have on the screen here is our FPS at the various TDP settings while playing our gameplay loop in Elden Ring. Our dark blue bar corresponds to Windows 11 average FPS. Our dark red bar corresponds to SteamOS average FPS. Light blue is Windows 11 1% low frames, and light red is SteamOS 1% low frames. And working our way from left to right, we've got 15 watts, balanced TDP settings, 20 watts, and 25 watts. And in this graph, higher is better. And we can see across the board, SteamOS is rocking it at all TDP settings, both in terms of the average FPS and the 1% low frames. In other words, under SteamOS, Elden Ring not only has better performance, but it has better quality of service. This is incredible. In some of these cases, SteamOS has 16% better performance than Windows 11. Let's take a look at the peak GPU temperatures while running our Elden Ring gameplay loops. Again, blue corresponds to Windows 11 and red corresponds to SteamOS. Here, lower is better. The reason this data is important is it gives us some insight into how well optimized SteamOS is on the Z2-Extreme APU, which is the APU that the Legion Go 2 sports. Mind you, I've done a ton of gameplay testing and performance analysis on the OG Legion Go, and typically across the board, what I see are better thermals under SteamOS. That wasn't the case early on when SteamOS first started coming out. This is something that happened over time. And so the fact that our thermal performance isn't better than Windows likely means that there's still a lot of room for improvements here. And we're going to see a little bit more of that here in a little bit when we get to the next game. This graph does also show across the board the thermals are comparable. Any difference about 1 degree Celsius isn't a huge concern, but when you talk about 2 degrees Celsius, that's more than just noise here. And so at the 25 watt TDP setting, we can see that Windows definitely has better thermal performance here. This lets me know that there's room for improvements under SteamOS. All right, let's take a look at the performance of NBA 2K26 on our Legion Go 2. Here we have our graph of our average frame rates under both Windows 11 and SteamOS. The blue bar is Windows 11 average FPS, red bar is SteamOS average FPS, light blue is Windows 11 1% lows, and light red is SteamOS 1% lows. From left to right, we've got 15 watts, balanced TDP settings, 20 watts, and 25 watts. At the lower TDP settings, we see that SteamOS is comparable to Windows, but has slightly better quality of service in terms of 1% lows. As we start cranking up our TDP, we see that not only does Windows have better performance, it also has better quality of service in terms of our 1% lows. And what I really find interesting that we see in both of the graphs from Elden Ring and NBA 2K26 here is the balanced TDP setting is somewhere between 15 and 20 watts. It's not quite 15 watts. You know, I've seen in BazaiOS, for example, balance typically maps to 15 watt TDP, but it looks like under Windows and SteamOS, it's somewhere in between. So it's almost like it tries to go higher, and then whenever it starts to heat up a little bit, it brings it back down to 15. So we're oscillating between those two TDP settings. This is also very telling here. NBA 2K26 is a challenging game to play because, especially in the congested lobby areas of the game, players might spawn randomly. And so while I created a tight gameplay loop that we use for all of these performance benchmarks, there's a lot of non-determinism in the game itself. Benchmarks are very deterministic, and so they're really nice for sussing out things like different settings for the same game on the same hardware. But to really try to tease out the differences between SteamOS and Windows, you have to really search here. And this is a game where I feel like as time goes on and Proton keeps getting improvements, the differences will shrink. But another thing we're going to see here in a second is there's a lot of room for improvement for the power governor under SteamOS. Here we have a graph of our max GPU temperature while running our gameplay loop under NBA 2K26. The blue bar is Windows 11 max GPU temperature, and the red bar is SteamOS's max GPU temperature. And we can see at the lower TDP settings, Windows and SteamOS are neck and neck. On my OG Legion Go, I typically see lower temperatures even at the lower TDP settings compared to Windows. So this makes me feel like there's still room for improvement. And then we see the same trend here. As we make our way to the 25 watt TDP, SteamOS has slightly worse thermal performance. And one important note here about NBA 2K26, right out of the box, if you just set your TDP setting, if you go under the power customization options and you adjust the clock frequency that you want to give to the GPU, this tells the power governor how much power to provide to the GPU, or gives it kind of a hint. And so by picking the optimal frequency, I was able to obtain this gameplay performance that we looked at in today's video. If I didn't do that, the performance would have been far worse under SteamOS. So I know for a fact at Valve, pencils are not down yet in terms of Legion Go 2 support or the Z2-Extreme APU. They're probably still actively working on this. I'm going to be very interested to track this performance over time. This is something that I did internally here at Innovision Games during the launch of SteamOS for the Legion Go S, but I never really quantified or published my results. Here, I'm putting together a framework so we can keep track of that over time. What I really like about today's study is we saw an example of gameplay performance where SteamOS truly shines, and in some cases even has 15% better performance. We also got to see an example where Windows has an obvious edge over SteamOS. When making the conclusion as to which operating system has better performance, it's not always clear cut and dry. For certain multiplayer games, Windows is going to have a significant advantage because a lot of the network code is made for Windows, and so that network code is running under ProtonDB and this compatibility layer. I imagine there's a lot of overhead for that network code. Whereas like if you're playing a lot of offline or not multiplayer games or games that don't have newer anti-cheat methods, SteamOS is going to have a clear advantage. I imagine that performance benefit will carry through for a lot of older games. Another really neat thing about this study is we can clearly see in this data that the power performance under SteamOS has not yet been optimized for the Z2-Extreme APU. So there's still some work to be done here, and I'm really looking forward to tracking this performance over time. Were any of these results surprising to you all out there? Let me know, hit me up in the comment section, or were you expecting this? Let's have a discussion about it. Also, I'd be curious what other games you all would like to see performance tested here. I'm especially excited about this type of test methodology because it shows real-world gameplay performance. In the real world, data is messy and gameplay can be messy. Effectively, an in-game benchmark tells you how well the in-game benchmark runs across various hardware. It doesn't necessarily always give you insight to how well the game will run on that hardware. In the real world, you don't know when a player character might spawn in the lobby or when you might miss an attack on an enemy and it causes things to go in a different direction. That's what I really like about today's study. We created this tight gameplay loop that's repeatable, the true real-world nature of the performance on these devices under the two different software stacks. Like I said, I'm super hyped to keep tracking all this. Let me know if there's other metrics you'd like to see. Let me know if there's other games you'd like to see. Hit that like button, hype, and subscribe. That way you don't miss all the amazing toys and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.